I have a new TV show on Newsmax TV on Saturdays at 7:30. Tune in, you'll enjoy it.
The election of 1800 has often been called the second or third American Revolution, Declaration of Independence being the first, Constitution the second, and the election of 1800 being the third, because it marked the first time in American history, and probably in world history, that political parties alternated power in a democracy. The Federalists had ruled under George Washington for 8 years and then John Adams for 4 years. And in the election of 1800, Thomas Jefferson, the head of the Republican Democrat Party, the opposition to the Federalists, took over. And it was peaceful and nobody got killed and no reign of terror. And it was a model example of democracy at work. John Adams, as president, was alternately hated and loved, depending on what happened in foreign policy. The Federalists under Washington and Adams were basically pro-British and anti-French. They were mainly worried about the reign of terror coming to the United States and the lower classes reaping bloody havoc on the rich people. And the Federalists, who represented the richer people, and the Republicans, who represented the poorer people, liked the French Revolution but disliked the British monarchy and class system. And they were afraid that the Federalists would bring a king back in the United States. Well, in 1798, France began preying on American ships that were ferrying trade back and forth. Most of America's trade was with Britain at that point, and the French wanted to enforce an embargo against Britain. So over 300 American ships every year were seized by the French Navy, their goods looted, and the owners not recompensed. Some of the sailors were impressed into service in the French Navy. And it was a real scandal, and everybody was very upset about it. Adams sent some commissioners to negotiate, and the French were very arrogant, and they said, "We won't receive these commissioners because you're too insignificant a country." And then they said, "Well, if you bribe us $1 million to our foreign minister, Talleyrand, we'll negotiate with you." And that gave rise to the slogan by John Marshall, who became chief judge, who was one of the envoys who they spurned, saying, "Millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute." Anyway, that occasioned a tremendous anti-French feeling throughout the United States that really buoyed the Adams administration and led to tremendous gains by him, and it looked like he would win the next election. Then there was a coup in France, and Napoleon took over from the Directory that had been running things before. And Napoleon saw no need to fight with the United States. He wanted to make peace with the US. And suddenly the French raid stopped, and the possibility of war with France receded dramatically. And that really bolstered the Jefferson forces and made it very likely that they would win the election. The other problem was that John Adams did not take criticism well. He was notoriously thin-skinned. And when people began to criticize him as the foreign policy oscillated, he reacted harshly and passed the Alien and Sedition Acts that basically made it a crime to criticize the government and essentially repealed the First Amendment. And he locked up 6 or 8 Republican editors of newspapers for writing material that cast negative things on him. One article even just said that he was bald and ugly, and that was enough to get the editor put in prison. That kindled a real wave of anti-federalist sentiment and animated Jefferson's victory in the election. So in the election, Jefferson carried the South, which he had done previously. Adams carried New England, but most of the swing states, New York, Pennsylvania, and so on, went Republican. So Jefferson looked like he was going to become the next president. But there was one big more obstacle remaining, a guy named Aaron Burr, and we'll talk about that next Saturday.